You're listening to Tay Radio Marin, a show run by youth in Marin County to inspire, educate, and be heard. With your host, Annalie Reyes.
And your co-host, Santi Hernandez.
And your co-host, Minsoon.
Thank you for joining us this week on Tay Radio. Make sure to tune in every Friday at 4 p.m. And as always, don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Tay Radio Marin.
Hello, welcome back to Tay Radio, everyone. I'm your host, Annalie Reyes.
I'm your host, Santi Hernandez.
And I'm your host, Javier Vicuna.
On today's show, we'll be talking about Black History Month. And we just wanted to give more recognition to African Americans and the history that has been here in America. And we just want to give recognition to it. But before we do talk about more of what African Americans did, we will be letting Santi have quote of the week.
Thank you, Annalie. So my quote of the week, I'm trying to think of how I feel this week and how I feel with everything that's been going on. And I found this quote by Muhammad Ali, and it says, "He who is not courageous enough to take risks will accomplish nothing in life." And I found this quote to represent kind of the American history, because so many people who have fought for a change and to make a difference, they took that they were courageous to do what they had to do to be able to make a difference. So all of these people who have made a difference in our in American history have taken risks. Reality, many of these people who risked their lives were killed and murdered. So we do know in Black history, there are many Americans who fought for a change, and due to that wanting a change, they were killed, and due to all of that. So I thought this quote represents a lot of, it represents American history.
Thank you, Santi, for giving us more encouragement to take risks and not to be afraid to make mistakes, because we do learn from mistakes. And yeah, right now we'll be playing the PSA and then we'll be right back.
Are you in an unhealthy relationship? Are you a victim of a crime? Need someone to talk to? Well, the Victim Witness Program is able to help you by giving you the support and help that you need to be safe. You can call the Victim Witness Program at 415-473-5080. Again, the number is 415-473-5080.
Welcome back. The PSA you just watched or heard was hopefully useful, and we wanted to return back with more about Black History Month, and we wanted to give some recognition to important people in the history that may have not been mentioned in our history class when we were in school. And we have some honorable mentions like Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, W.E.B. Du Bois, Medgar Evers, Wilma Rudolph, and more. Of course, we won't have time to talk about all of the achievements of all the African Americans that did their part in history, but we do want to mention at least a few. And Javier will be beginning with what he thinks, or what is one of the African Americans that he wanted to mention on this show.
So I went ahead and chose 3. I wish I could choose more because there's so many great African Americans that have done so much in our history. But I'll start with Malcolm X. He was an African American Muslim minister and human rights activist who wrote an autobiography that popularized his ideas and inspired the Black Power movement. He also merged with Islam with Black nationalism through the belief system known as the Nation of Islam. I recommend you read his autobiography if you have the chance to. It's really, really good, and I highly recommend it. The other person I'd like to talk about is Rosa Parks. Obviously, she's an icon and a super important part of our history. She was an American activist that led the civil rights movement. Due to her pivotal role in the Montgomery bus boycott after refusing to give up her seat in the bus to a white person. And that went ahead and just kind of triggered an amazing movement. And obviously, she had a lot to do with MLK's rising as well. The last person I want to talk about here is Harriet Tubman. She was an American abolitionist and political activist who was born into slavery, but helped approximately 70 enslaved people escape through a network of anti-slavery activists and safe houses known as the Underground Railroad. I'll be talking a little more about her later in the show.
I did wanted to first ask you guys, like, have you guys been like taught about this in school? I remember being taught about Harriet Tubman when I was in 8th grade. I did like a book. I would have to like I was like it was a project and I had to like pick like 3 authors and I chose Harriet Tubman and her story and I just like made a story about it and I remember specifically Harriet Tubman. And I was just wondering if you guys like learned about Malcolm. I did learn about Rosa Parks as well, but I was just wondering, did you guys learn that in school?
In my middle school, I learned about Harriet Tubman and Rosa Parks. In elementary school, I actually learned about MLK, but I actually never had a class that mentioned Malcolm X, which is kind of weird because I feel he's super relevant in what he says. That's why I recommend people to go out and, read his autobiography, just because I don't think a whole lot of high schools mention Malcolm X in history classes. But he's definitely like a really important history figure to look into.
I learned about the 3, Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman in middle school. I had a teacher, and his name was Mr. Brace, and he was a very different history teacher. He was very open about the, American history, and he was with no filters, and he would explain so many different explicit scenes that happened during history. So I'm grateful that I got to be in his classroom because he was a very open teacher. So he allowed us to have both perspectives of white Americans and African Americans. So I got to learn about these 3 people in different ways, which was very interesting. And I wanted to mention Emmett Till, who's a 14-year-old African American who was lynched in Mississippi in 1955. And he was lynched because he was accused of offending a white woman in her family's grocery store. And the reason why I want to mention him, and it might sound weird to many of you, as what did he accomplish? Well, to me, he represents all of the African Americans who have died because of police brutality, and it still continues to this day with Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and part of African American history to me is not just about the people. There's Martin Luther King, but sometimes I feel like society kind of puts a filter over the things that happened because, for example, Martin Luther King, we say he died, but in reality, he was murdered. And it's something that over the years in classrooms and everything, it's kind of covered. It's put a filter over certain things. So with Emmett Till, it reminds me of all of the people who were they're in this country. Back in the day, they were slaves. They went through so many painful things and moments, and so that's why I wanted to talk about Emmett Till, because he represents all of those um, um, African Americans who have been killed due to police brutality and many more. And just to bring it into history, I was doing some research and I was amazed at just from 2013 to 2019, over 1,944 Black people have been killed due to police brutality and other similar activities. So Black history that's Black history in reality. And I'm saying it because I don't want to put filters to this history, because it's a huge part of our American history. So that's what I wanted to talk about. And now I'm going to hand it off to Annalie.
All right, thank you, Santi, for talking more about the recent stuff that has been happening. And I feel like that will become history, and it is history. And I'm just glad that you mentioned about that. I did not realize, like, I didn't think of it. I was like thinking about history, about like like back in the old days, but it is true that it is history now, that all the stuff that has been happening is going to be history, and it's just huge events that is not going to be forgotten, especially with the whole big movement with George Floyd. And yeah, I did wanted to mention some people that like were like more about the history, like far from where we are right now, which is one of them is Frantz Fanon. He was a French West Indian political philosopher from Martinique, which was a French colony. He was known for his literature about post-colonial studies and critical theory. He used clinical research and lived experience of racism to analyze the effects of racism on people of color individuals, and also economical and psychological impacts on imperialism. And his most known books are Black Skin, White Mask, A Sighing Colonialism, and The Wrench of the Earth. When I first heard about him, it was in the Presente class that we had in here in San Rafael. There's a program given from Multicultural Center of Marin, and I first read his autobiography when I was in Presente, and it was kind of interesting learning about it. It was a lot about colonial literature that we learned. And there's also W.E.B. Du Bois. I did learn about him in my AP US History class. And he was most known for being a socialist, historian, and civil rights activist. He co-founded the NAACP, which is National Association for the Advance of Colored People, in 1909. He was able to point out some effects of racism in his literature, and he was able to build consciousness to his readers. So it was a big effect, especially with literature. Back in the days, you can tell like that literature was a major role in playing and just bringing consciousness to people of what it was like being an African American during that time. And there's also Wilma Rudolph. She's most famous known as an American track and field athlete who was born in Tennessee. Rudolph had polio, which is a virus that destroys nerve cells in the spinal cord. And so she recovered as a kid and became a professional athlete. So there was like a threat, like when she was a kid, that she was not going to be able to walk. She could be like paralyzed, but she ended up being a professional athlete. But she did die because of a brain tumor. I don't know if it's linked to it, but she did die from that. And she won 3 sprint gold medals at the 1960 Rome Olympic Games. And you can watch the video of her running in the Olympic channel, and it's kind of inspiring. When I was watching it, I felt like I was running too. Because when I was little, I used to do track and field, and it was inspiring how she there's like quotes on the video, but I definitely recommend you guys watching it if you want to learn more about her. But that's it about what I wanted to mention. But I'm curious again, have you guys heard about Franz Fanon, W.E.B. Du Bois, or Wilma Rudolph in your classes?
I haven't heard from either three of these people that you talked about in my classes, but I'm glad that you talked about them. Especially I mean, I've heard about Franz Fanon, but I've just till now learned what he did. And I think he's awesome, and I'm gonna be looking into him more. But yeah, I did not know about Fanon or Du Bois or Wilma Rudolph. I haven't heard those three other than Fanon. But I think those were great choices.
And Santi, did you learn any of those?
Because I read a book about how communities work, and I believe he was mentioned about he created the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. So I do remember that. I've read a little bit about his story. I otherwise the other two I have not heard about, but I'm really curious to watch the video that you mentioned. My family is very athletic and my brother's a track runner, so I'm curious to watch that video. So thank you for sharing, Annalie.
Yeah, I did not hear Web the Voice until like 11th grade. Yeah, last year. It's crazy to think it was last year because a whole lot happened since then. But yeah, it was more about imperialism and just it was more like dated closer to our century, if that makes sense. So maybe that's why it's like barely like maybe like my years they're like teaching it now. I'm not sure, but yeah, it was pretty interesting learning about him. And I was just curious because I'm pretty sure we all went to different schools, so like they have different curriculums, so it's pretty interesting to know about that. But we'll be right back after playing this song by Crepe, and we hope you enjoy it.
Adam J made this. Hey, let's do this shit. Hey, it's Craig Summer. Michael Christmas. Let's do this. Good vibes, late nights, summer days, it's alright. Really love a girl that wanna spend the night. Kick back.
Welcome back. The artist you were listening to was by Crepe. You can stream his music on Spotify at Crepe. And if you are or know a local artist, send your music our way via email or DM at Terry Marin. And you can be mentioned on the show, or you can be a guest on our show and talk more about your journey of being an artist. We would like for you guys to talk more about it and inspire more people in our community. Or if you are involved in a community right now, I know it's hard because of the pandemic, but if you're doing anything that relates to Zoom or anything technology that you're able to communicate with the community, let us know. And we were more curious about that too. So yeah, but now we're going to be talking more about people who inspired us or amazed us. And Javier is going to be talking about a little bit more about what African American or who he picked that amazed him or inspired him.
Yeah, so personally, all African Americans from history inspire me, but if I had to choose one, I would have to pick Harriet Tubman. I mean, her ability to help out 70 enslaved individuals escape through a network of anti-slavery activists in safe houses is just like amazing. Like the Underground Railroad is so cool to learn about and how it was done during such a terrible time for African Americans. Not saying that things have gotten better, but definitely it was a much harder time than it was now. But we're still working through that. But the point is, like, the Underground Railroad being present during that is really inspiring. Like, that isn't an easy task for someone who was born into slavery, but she is a proud example that nothing is impossible to achieve. Being a first generation person of color in America, she inspires me to be able to work on myself and achieve things that my family and I never achieved before, such as graduating from college. Even though my family and I aren't the most well off, opportunities will still come up for us if we continue to work hard. And Harriet Tubman is just a figure who represents the ability that anyone can achieve their dreams, no matter who they are. And that's why she is the pick for the most inspiring African American in history for me.
And Santi, I would like to know about you. Like, who inspires you if you would be able to choose one African American from history?
To be very honest, I don't think I can pick one. And the reason behind it is growing up, I grew up in a isolated kind of way because when I came here, I have an indigenous background. I think I mentioned this to you only before, but I speak my native language with my family. And when I came here, I had so much struggles with speaking Spanish and English, and I got kind of put on the side all the time. And so I know I know a little bit about what it is to be feel left out and treated different. And so when I think about the African community, I think it inspires me how so many African Americans back in the day and today are successful. There are many African American businessmen and women in politics and activists. So to me, it's so inspiring how even though they face so many challenges day by day by our own community, they're still able to break through those barriers and achieve what they want to achieve. And one of the things that I've wanted and try to do my best is put myself in their shoes. And for example, Black History Month is a month that's supposed to be to celebrate and honor those African American people who have accomplished things and inspired people. But when I talk to African Americans, they mention that to many of them, Black History Month is like a joke to them because they're like, why do we have 1 month that is designed just for Black History Month, and why isn't there White History Month? Because they believe that Black History Month is American history. There's no difference. And so when I talk to people like that and I hear their stories, they inspire me to be a better person, to put myself in their shoes, to understand them, because I don't experience what they experience, but I understand that they have it harder than I do and many of us because of their skin color. So that's that's what inspires me to be better and to do what I can to have justice for everyone. And like I mentioned, that most of our history is sometimes filtered, and it's so hard sometimes to step outside of that filter and see the reality, because it's just normal to at this point it seems normal to us. So that's what inspires me, is just the whole entire community. So I'm handed off to Annalie.
Thank you, Santi, for explaining more about what some African Americans have shared about their viewpoint on this, because I know that's important to consider. And I did wanted to mention about one person that inspired me, but I think it can relate to a lot of other people right now, because there's a lot of businesswomen doing their own thing on Etsy, online, making masks and stuff like that. So there is Madam CJ Walker, and she's being more known now because there's like a show about her on Netflix, and it's just, I feel like a lot, like we're trying, like at least we're like bringing more awareness now, and hopefully it can help people be more aware of African Americans and their history. But Madam C.J. Walker was like an American businesswoman, and she was the first millionaire of being an African American. And there's like a Netflix show, and like it shows her hardships of um, like her business and just being a woman, and I feel like it just gives me courage, or like inspires me to work hard as a woman and achieve the goals that I want to do. And so with that, I do want to make sure if you guys have any final words before we end the show to talk right now.
No, I think it's great that you mentioned Madame CJ Walker, because I did hear about the Netflix show. I think it's called Self Made. I've been meaning to watch it, but now you've kind of piqued my interest more in watching it. I think it's a great story, especially now. I mean, not just that she's African American, but also she's female. And becoming a self-made millionaire is super inspiring. And like you mentioned before, there are a lot of people, especially right now because of the pandemic, we're all trying to we're all trying to do ways of getting money, and being able to, be a person of color and kind of maybe represent your culture through what you sell. So selling things that like represent your culture um, is better than any kind of like tourist like gift shop thing that you could buy at like some place that is trying to appeal to like a culture. I feel like it's more meaningful if you were to go out there, make something that is special to your culture, and sell that to people. Because not only are you representing your culture, but you're also bringing awareness to where you come from, and also making cash. So it's really a great thing, and I think a lot of young people should be looking to do that because apps like Etsy, you mentioned Depop, all those places are really good for like starting out to sell things online. So if you could maybe find a way to maybe think of something that's important in your culture and you could make yourself, it could really start a great business for yourself. So
We are all beautiful in our own ways, in our own culture. Every culture is beautiful. I think that's the beauty about having a different culture is, you have different traditions, different things, and it's just a reminder that you are important, and that if you have a different skin color or if you have a different religion, that doesn't make you any less to anyone. The you are today, that makes the world great. Just a reminder that you're beautiful and that you matter.